Hello again, this is Skip, Victor Echo 6, Bravo, Golf Tango. I don't get into terrestrial VHF work too much. I built some of this stuff over 30 years ago and rebuilt it again and again. And on the weekend, I had it up and running and had a little bit of fun. So just a rundown on what I'm using here is in this small rack, I have a UHF amp and a VHF amp, both using a pair of 4CX250 vacuum tubes. Built both these amplifiers, like I said, over 30 years ago, but they've been rebuilt over and over. And they share a common power supply at the bottom, which is producing the plate voltage, screen voltage, etc. I've last couple of years rebuilt the screen supply to a better regulated circuit, and they really work. The amplifiers put out quite well, especially the VHF one. For this little show and tell, I'm going to talk about the VHF, and this is the radio I use for terrestrial work, an old Kenwood TS711, something I can repair. This is a plate circuit. Some of you who've been around for a long time will recognize this design. It came out of one of the old ARRL handbooks, I don't know, 30, 40, maybe more years ago. 4CX250s back then were quite available, so I used them a lot. This is a picture of the grid circuit. Not much to it. That was nice about this amplifier. It's so darn simple. It was very easily to build, and on the VHF side of things, it really was a performer. Since both UHF and VHF amplifiers use the 4CX250s, the power supply is common to both of them. That's why there's a VHF UHF switch on there. Looking on the back of the power supply, you can see the switch there in the middle, and that's what switches the B plus to the different amplifiers for the plate voltage, and all the other connections for going between the two of them. Notice it's having two power supplies for the same kind of amplifier. The underside of the power supply is more relays for switching grid voltage, screen voltages, you name it. It's all in there, so it's pretty compressed, gets pretty packed unit. One of the upgrades I did to this power supply in the last couple of years was, instead of using the old Zener diodes for the screen bias, they got kind of hot. I built this shunt regulator board. A little bit better design, still old school, but it works much better, and it was a chore getting that to fit underneath the power supply, where all the other stuff is. The other upgrade I did to it also in the last couple of years was put a much larger squirrel cage fan on the thing to get more air going through the tubes. I had to build a special adapter for this larger fan to fit on the back of the chassis, but it all came together. As you saw in the earlier picture, what I've got up there is some old antennas I built out of old television element material way back when. The VHF array consists of 4 8-element Yagis phased all together, and the top one is 2 skeleton slot UHF Yagis, again built out of old TV elements. This gray fiberglass box up the tower is where I have the VHF receive preamp, switching relays, etc., stuff like that. And this is where all the fun started this weekend. This is what it looks like inside. A couple of old Dow key relays. They're 110 volt coils. I built this so many years ago, I don't recall, but somebody had taken the end connectors off the left-hand side and roughly made up a brass plate and put B and C connectors on. So I just carried on and built B and C connectors on the preamp, which is at the top. Preamp is an old Demi average preamp I built many years ago, and milled out this aluminum block for it to sit in as the enclosure. This is what it looks like all put together. Anyways, this whole setup has been up there running like this for well over 20 years now. Anyways, on the weekend here, we have a local group that has a VHF single sideband net, and I've noticed actually for the last couple of weeks that some local guys can't seem to hear me. I can hear everybody else just fine, but I usually just run that usual 10 watts out of this 711, and I decided, well, I'm going to turn the amplifier on and burn the cobwebs out of it and see what gives. Like I said, these 4CX250s can really put out power on VHF. This meter is fairly accurate. I've checked it many times, and it's, like say, just right around 1 kilowatt of power on the output. So everything's just fine, but that's how it's supposed to work, but it didn't. Of course, at the time, I wasn't recording any videos, so I'm fortunate I can't show you anything, but take my word for it. Those 3 meters there were pinned, solid, and I reduced the power, retuned, tried everything, and it was just pinned, and then it dawned on me, it says, there, I got a problem up top somewhere. An antenna problem? Oh yes, I think so. Since these VHF antennas are using T-matches, I should see a full continuity up the feed line through the relay box to the antennas, showing a dead short, which would be normal with a T-match. So I disconnected the hard line that goes up the tower and took an ohmmeter and measured the continuity in the end of the end connector, and it was wide open. Well, I hated the thought of it, but I have to climb up the darn tower, and I wasn't looking forward to it. I used to enjoy climbing towers, but as my knees got worse, I kind of dreaded the thoughts, but actually I've been feeling pretty good, so up we went, slowly, one foot at a time. It's been a couple of years since I've been up this darn thing, and it was kind of get up there and see how much rust was going on, and oh yeah, my nice 23 centimeter loop Yagi. Oh, what a treat. Nice view of the country to the north of me, though. One thing about being up here is nice looking around. So enough goofing around, got my legs into where I wanted to be in for position, and proceeded in taking the relay box off the tower. So I got the box off the tower. I didn't take any pictures. It's just too many things to drop. Got it down in the shack, and here's the layout. So when I have the receive preamp turned off, or I'm in transmit mode, the relays are unenergized. In other words, their position is normally closed. So the RF going to the bottom, to the input, should go up, to the coax jumper, to the other coax relay, and then back out to the antennas, a continuous path. This is known as the fail-safe setup or configuration. So if something was to fail, the power to the relays or the sequencer, the antenna is always connected to the transmit line, and it won't blow up the preamp. So if I was to take an ohmmeter and connect it to the center pin of the transmit input on the bottom relay, and then hook it to the center pin of the antenna relay, I should see full continuity. Well, I didn't. It was wide open. These old relays have an inspection hole, and a cover snaps off so you can look down inside the contacts. And this is what it should look like. The center arm is touching the contact on the bottom, which is the normally closed. And this is what it looked like. The center common arm, which moves back and forth, is stuck right in the center between the two contacts. So it was wide open, all right. No wonder there's no continuity. Now you have to understand how these relays work, this particular type. There's no spring to push it over to the normally closed position when the relay is unenergized. It actually works just on the tension of the center arm itself. And that's what holds it over there. When the relay is energized, it fights that and pushes it over to the other contact and holds it there as long as it's energized. This is a picture of the energizing coil for the relay, and you can see the little arm that goes inside the body that pushes that center arm over. And that's all there is to it. So you pull this off, and then you can look at the contacts and see if it's going back and forth, and it was okay. The problem was the little hinge pin there, you can see some rust on it. Well, it had seized up, and it couldn't return all the way back from just the tension of the center arm itself. So it was an easy enough fix. I just had to pull that pin out of there, and I took some emery cloth and polished up good and cleaned her up, and did it to both relays. Nice and free now, so the relay action is perfect now. No problem whatsoever. Easy fix. So since I haven't had this box down on a bench for years and years, I figured I'd better go through it. And I have a little bit more test gear now to really go through it, so it was time to check it out. Since I'm a bit of a test gear junkie, one thing I've acquired long past after I built this preamp box was this HP 8970A noise figure meter. The first time I saw one of these at one of the microwave update conferences, I knew I had to have one. I was just totally blown away at what this thing can do for testing preamps and transverters, etc. The meter itself is not too hard to find and not too expensive, but it's the noise source or the noise generator head that's the hard one to come by. The other thing I've collected for this machine is a set of standards. These are a collection of preamps for different frequencies, and I've taken them to other conferences and had the experts, we'll call them, with large, more expensive machinery measuring the noise figure and the gain. And I use these as standards when I'm comparing them to other units I have under test. This is an exact picture, but when I hooked up the preamp to the noise figure meter, I found that it had no gain, and noise figure was sky high. I didn't believe it at first, so I found another one, and another old VHF preamp, and stuck it in there and saw that it worked. So I guess the high SWR, when the relay opened up, the massive amounts of RF power there probably took out the gas FET that was in the preamp itself. So one more thing to fix. Luckily, I had a spare gas FET, so I replaced it. And then the other thing I found was the old BNC connectors, horrible connectors for being outside. Probably they've either worn or got corroded, and the gain was all over the place, and the noise figure was up and down. So I knew the BNC connectors had to go. I decided to switch everything over to an SMA style connector. The preamp itself was easy, just a little brass plate soldered on top with the SMA connectors bolted on and connected inside. The old coax relays had to be switched over too, because they were BNC connectors. I don't know when this happened. I don't remember doing it, but anyways, they had taken the end connectors off and just soldered BNC connectors on these brass plates, and then screwed them back to the relay body. Well, I thought I can do the same. I simply did sort of the same thing. I cut out a brass plate and drilled holes for the SMA connector to thread into, and then larger holes to connect it to the relay body. Inside, on the end of the SMA connectors, I soldered the main contact knob, we'll call it, for the relay contacts. It worked well. So I hooked up the preamp by itself onto the meter and started tuning things, testing it, and then I had to adjust the gain a little bit for the new MOSFET, or gas FET I should say, because it wanted to oscillate when I put it back inside the enclosure housing. But it measured out not too bad. I don't have a standard for 144 megahertz, so I think this is probably as good as it's going to get. It's good enough for me anyways for terrestrial use. Next, I got the new SMA cables built up and connectors put on to able to connect all the relays into the preamp and see what the result was going to be now with all the extra, we'll call it junk, added to the preamp. And it didn't surprise me. So this is what it measured out as with all the relays and extra cables connected. The insertion gain dropped to 16 dB, and the noise figure went up to 3.5 decibels. So this is what happens when you start adding junk, we'll call it, into the into the receive line. But oh well, it works very well for what I'm using it for. So I put it all back together, and the next day I went back up the tower again and hooked the relay box to the tower, got everything hooked up and tested things, and it's all working good. Was on the usual weekend net here just yesterday, and things worked like a charm. People could hear me again. I could hear them really well, and all in all, it was a success. So another job well done. I sure enjoyed it. So that pretty well wraps it up. Once again, thanks for stopping by and having a look. 73's from Skip, Victor Echo 6, Bravo, Golf Tango.